In the dappled stillness of a tropical forest morning, when the sun has just begun to pierce the canopy with scattered shafts of light, a shimmer catches the eye. Suspended between two trees, barely visible at a distance yet blazing when caught by the right angle, stretches a web that glows with a burnished hue, somewhere between amber and flame. This is no ordinary spider's trap. It belongs to the Golden Silk Orb-weaver, an architect whose very building materials bend light into spectacle. Unlike the dull silver threads of most garden webs, the silk here gleams gold, a pigment born not from dye, but from proteins woven in the spider's silk glands. These structural proteins scatter light differently across the spectrum, producing a golden tint that, to human vision, gleams extravagantly. To the creatures of the forest, the effect may be more than cosmetic. Some researchers suggest that the glow mimics the warm colors of flowers and new leaves, luring nectar-seeking insects that would otherwise bypass the trap. Others argue the silk's sheen is a kind of camouflage, blending the strands into the sunlit clutter of foliage. In either case, the web is more than a snare. It is a sun trap, a shimmering lens through which survival is engineered. At close range, the complexity of its design reveals itself. What appears from afar as a glowing sheet is in truth an orb, a carefully measured geometry of radiating spokes joined by concentric spirals. The spider begins construction with a bridge line, anchored high between branches, then drops down to form a Y-shaped frame. From this scaffold it draws radii like the spokes of a wheel, all converging on a central hub. Only then does it add the spirals, first a loose temporary scaffolding to stabilize the framework, then a tight inward coil of capture silk. This capture silk is different from the frame lines, coated with sticky droplets that hold prey with remarkable efficiency. The Golden Orb-weaver may spend hours in this meticulous labor, measuring each placement not by sight but by touch, pulling, releasing, and tensioning the lines until the circle is both taut and resilient. The geometry is not accidental. Every spoke and spiral creates a balance between flexibility and strength, ensuring that when a struggling insect crashes into the strands, the force is absorbed rather than snapped. The web is not a static object. It is an evolving structure, altered daily to meet the spider's needs. At dawn, while dew still coats the strands, the orb-weaver may dismantle yesterday's creation, consuming it strand by strand. This recycling serves two purposes. It reclaims the costly proteins used in silk production, and it removes debris that could betray the web's presence to wary prey. Once ingested, the silk proteins pass through the spider's digestive system and are respun into fresh material, a process as efficient as any human recycling scheme. By mid-morning, a new web may already be complete, glistening in the renewed sunlight, its strands subtly adjusted to wind conditions or prey abundance. Over several days, the orb expands, the spider adding new spirals and anchoring points until the trap spans more than a meter across, large enough to intercept butterflies, bees, or even small birds if they blunder too recklessly. For the orb-weaver, patience is the greater part of hunting. She rests at the hub or on a retreat line connected to the web, her long legs splayed wide to sense the faintest tremor. The web is a vibration map. Each radial line transmits specific frequencies depending on where an impact occurs. A falling leaf sends a dull thump that quickly dies away. A trapped beetle produces a chaotic flutter of mixed signals. A mosquito's frantic struggle sends rapid, high-frequency pulses. The spider interprets these vibrations with exquisite precision, distinguishing false alarms from genuine meals. Once the right signal comes, the response is instantaneous. The spider darts across the web, locating the prey not by vision, but by triangulation of vibrations, and in a matter of seconds, subdues it with a quick bite. Venom flows, silk wraps follow, and soon the victim is immobilized, stored like a parcel to be consumed at leisure. But no structure so exposed to the elements remains flawless. Twigs fall, winds tear, birds brush past. Damage is constant. Here the orb-weaver shows another aspect of her engineering: rapid repair. When a strand is broken, she immediately inspects the breach, clipping away loose fibers, re-anchoring lines, and respinning spirals in a matter of minutes. High-speed filming reveals a methodical process, each leg performing a practiced role in maintaining the architecture. Repairs are not haphazard but calculated. The spider replaces only what is necessary, conserving energy and silk. If damage is catastrophic, she may abandon the web altogether, recycling what she can and starting anew elsewhere. This adaptability is essential in habitats where storms or large animals can sweep through without warning. The golden hue of the silk plays into the web's ecological drama in ways that remain partly mysterious. Some studies suggest that bees are drawn to the web, mistaking its color for floral nectar guides. Others show that in shaded forests, the silk reflects green light, blending almost invisibly against leaves, making the web harder for prey to detect. Whether lure or disguise, the pigment offers an evolutionary advantage that has been conserved across many populations. Interestingly, not all golden orb-weaver silk is equally colored. Individuals may produce deeper or paler shades depending on diet, age, or environmental conditions. The adaptability of silk properties speaks to the spider's ability to fine-tune her material for both ecological deception and structural strength. The orb-weaver herself is as striking as her web. Females dwarf the males, often reaching several centimeters in body length, with elongated legs banded in black and yellow. The sexual dimorphism is dramatic. While females build and maintain the grand webs, males live smaller, riskier lives. Often they linger at the edge of a female's web, attempting to sneak matings without being mistaken for prey. Their strategy is perilous. One false movement and the female may attack. For the male, courtship involves subtle plucks of the web, vibrations that signal his identity. Some succeed, leaving their genes woven into the next generation. Others become a meal, an energy source, recycled back into the spider's silk and eggs. Predators and parasites, too, interact with the web. Birds may harvest silk for nest linings drawn by its strength and elasticity. Tiny, kleptoparasitic spiders sometimes inhabit the outer reaches, feeding on captured prey scraps. Even wasps, specialized hunters of spiders, may invade, paralyzing the orb-weaver to provision their own larvae. Each interaction adds layers of ecological meaning to the web. It is not only a hunting device, but also a stage where multiple species intersect, negotiate, and compete. What makes the Golden Silk Orb-weaver extraordinary is not a single trait, but the synergy of all these adaptations. The golden coloration manipulates light and perception. The orb geometry balances strength with sensitivity. The recycling of silk conserves resources in a demanding environment. The vibration-based hunting strategy allows the spider to thrive without pursuit. Each behavior, each material property, is an answer to the relentless demands of survival in ecosystems where every calorie matters. The web is both home and hunting ground, defense and display, a fusion of biology and physics that rivals any human structure in efficiency. As the sun climbs higher, the web continues to glow, casting its golden filter across the forest understory. Insects will continue to fly into its invisible snare, drawn by accident or illusion. Each impact, each tremor, sets off a chain of behaviors refined over millions of years. And through it all, the orb-weaver waits in stillness, a patient engineer suspended in the light of her own creation. In the tall grasses of a late summer meadow, when cicadas buzz like tiny engines and butterflies drift lazily between stalks of wildflowers, a sudden flash of pattern reveals itself. Not in the petals or wings, but in the very fabric of a spider's trap. Across the silken orb of the wasp spider stretches a bold mark, a band of white silk that slices diagonally through the web like a jagged lightning bolt. Unlike the golden glow of the orb-weaver's tapestry or the subtle sheets of the funnel web hunter, this feature is not hidden or subdued. It is a signature, a bright zigzag known as the stabilimentum, and it sets the wasp spider apart as both architect and enigma. The orb itself is a textbook masterpiece, radial lines extending from a central hub, joined by spirals of sticky capture silk. Like other orb-weavers, the wasp spider builds at dusk or dawn, suspending her structure between grasses where passing insects are most abundant. Her body, striped in black, yellow, and white, mirrors the warning colors of a wasp, a form of Batesian mimicry that may discourage predators. Against the green of meadow plants, she rests at the hub, legs splayed in an X formation, her body aligned with the stabilimentum's blazing stroke. To the casual eye, it almost appears as though the spider herself has been stitched into the web as part of its design. But the stabilimentum is no mere decoration. It is built deliberately, strand by strand, after the main orb is complete. The spider lays down thicker, whiter silk, creating a zigzag band whose shape can vary. In some webs, it appears as a single vertical slash, in others as a crisscross of multiple bands. The question that has long occupied researchers is deceptively simple. Why? In evolution, silk is expensive to produce, and spiders do not waste such resources without reason. For decades, scientists have tested competing hypotheses, each one revealing a different angle on this mystery. One theory suggests camouflage. From above, where birds patrol the meadow skies, the zigzag's white blaze may break up the outline of the spider resting at the hub. The stabilimentum reflects ultraviolet light strongly, blending with the glare of sunlight filtering through grasses. To an avian predator scanning for movement, spider and silk together may dissolve into background noise. Yet camouflage alone does not explain the zigzag's conspicuousness from ground level, where it remains visible even to human eyes. Another line of inquiry proposes prey attraction. Many insects, including bees and butterflies, see ultraviolet light and are drawn to it in much the same way they are guided to nectar-rich petals. Polarized light tests show that stabilimenta reflect strongly in these wavelengths, creating a beacon against the otherwise transparent orb. In experimental setups, webs with zigzags capture significantly more prey than those without, particularly diurnal insects that rely on light cues for navigation. In this interpretation, the zigzag functions like a billboard, a glowing advertisement for a deadly trap. A third hypothesis looks inward to web mechanics. Because the stabilimentum is built of thicker silk, it may serve as reinforcement. Some studies indicate that webs bearing zigzags withstand higher stress before tearing, especially in the central hub where prey impact is most concentrated. In windy grasslands, this added strength may prevent catastrophic collapse. Yet here too, contradictions arise. Not all webs feature stabilimenta, and their absence does not always result in weaker structures. What emerges from these studies is a picture not of a single purpose, but of multiple overlapping advantages. The stabilimentum may simultaneously conceal, attract, and reinforce. Its role could shift depending on environmental conditions, prey abundance, predator presence, wind stress, so that the spider modulates construction according to need. The zigzag, in other words, may be a flexible tool, its meaning contingent on circumstance rather than fixed. The wasp spider's behavior around her zigzag offers further insight. When resting at the hub, she often aligns her body perfectly with the stabilimentum, her striped abdomen forming a continuation of the silk band. From a distance, spider and zigzag merge into one elongated mark. This alignment suggests that camouflage is indeed part of the strategy, turning the conspicuous blaze into a kind of optical trick. Insects approaching the web may be less able to distinguish the predator at its center, confusing pattern with pattern until it is too late. Yet not all visitors to the web are prey. The drama of reproduction adds another dimension to the zigzag's significance. Males, far smaller than the boldly banded females, must risk everything to mate. To do so, they approach the female's web cautiously, often waiting at the periphery before venturing inward. The stabilimentum may act as a cue in this process, signaling the presence of a resident female and the readiness of her orb. But for the males, the zigzag is double-edged. It guides them to opportunity, but also to mortal danger. Courtship involves subtle vibrations plucked through the web's lines, a coded rhythm meant to identify the male as suitor, not prey. If the female misinterprets or chooses otherwise, he may become a meal, consumed before his genetic contribution is secured. Observations show that many males do not survive their attempt, their bodies wrapped in the very silk that first drew them in. For the species, however, even a small proportion of successful matings is enough to ensure continuity. The interplay of predator, prey, and mate creates a layered ecological theater around the zigzag. Prey insects see it as a glowing landmark. Predators may overlook the spider hidden against it, and males read it as both invitation and warning. Few other web structures carry such complex and conflicting signals. In this sense, the stabilimentum is not just a piece of architecture, but a communication device, a silk inscription that speaks in multiple dialects of light, vibration, and form. The evolutionary persistence of this behavior suggests its benefits outweigh its costs. Building the zigzag requires both energy and time, resources the spider cannot afford to squander. That stabilimenta continue to appear in meadows across continents indicates that the balance of attraction, protection, and reinforcement has consistently paid off. Indeed, some research shows that juvenile wasp spiders are more likely to build zigzags than adults, perhaps because their smaller bodies require additional camouflage, or because they benefit more from increased prey capture. This ontogenetic variation hints at a life history strategy where the zigzag's function shifts with age and context. Viewed against the larger canvas of spider diversity, the wasp spider's stabilimentum illustrates the breadth of evolutionary experimentation. While some species favor invisibility, constructing webs with silks that vanish in certain wavelengths, the wasp spider embraces conspicuousness. It turns its trap into a signal, one that manipulates the sensory worlds of multiple creatures at once. Such strategies remind us that survival is not always about hiding. Sometimes it is about standing out in exactly the right way. By late afternoon, when the meadow's grasses sway in golden light, the zigzag blazes most brilliantly. A butterfly flutters close, drawn by the ultraviolet reflection. It strikes the sticky spirals, wings beating in vain. Instantly the wasp spider descends, legs wrapping, fangs piercing, and within moments the prey is subdued. From above, a bird glances down but sees only a streak of white silk among stalks, spider concealed by her alignment. At the web's edge, a hesitant male lingers, weighing his chances. For each participant, the zigzag means something different: food, safety, or fate. In the end, the stabilimentum is less a mystery to be solved than a testament to nature's layered logic. One structure born of silk can be camouflage, lure, shield, and beacon all at once. To walk through the meadow and glimpse its sudden flash is to witness an evolutionary inscription written in threads, a signature not of identity but of strategy. The wasp spider writes it anew each time she spins, a jagged mark that says, "Here is a trap, here is a hunter, here is survival woven into light." In the tangle of shrubs at the forest edge, where sunlight filters in broken shards and the air hums with insect traffic, a web stretches low across the passageways between stems. Unlike the shimmering golden discs of orb-weavers high in the canopy, this one hangs close to the ground, occupying the very lanes where beetles crawl, flies buzz, and butterflies squeeze through narrow gaps. Suspended at the center is a creature that looks less like a spider and more like a cartoon drawing of one. Round body, bright colors, and a spiky silhouette that suggests both warning and playfulness. This is the Spiny Orb-weaver, a tiny architect with a body armored in sharp, rigid projections, a fortress of chitin perched at the hub of her fragile trap. Her size is deceptive. Barely larger than a pea, she could easily be overlooked, yet her body is clad in a shell that would not look out of place on a medieval mace. These spines, rigid and often vividly colored, are not ornaments but defenses. Insectivorous birds, one of the greatest threats to small spiders, often hesitate to swallow prey with hard or awkward shapes. A spider encased in spikes is far less appealing than a soft-bodied one. Even lizards and frogs, common hunters of invertebrates, may reject such a meal after one painful attempt. Evolution has shaped this bizarre armor as insurance, allowing the Spiny Orb-weaver to build her web in dangerous places, open airways where prey is abundant, but predators patrol constantly. The architecture of her web reflects this high-risk, high-reward strategy. Set low among bushes or between the slender stems of herbs, the web intercepts insects that move through plant corridors. These are busy highways of the undergrowth, rich in pollinators moving from flower to flower, beetles searching for sap, and flies buzzing through the shade. Other orb weavers avoid such zones, preferring the higher canopy where bird traffic is lighter. But the spiny orb-weaver's armor gives her confidence to risk exposure. Here she reaps a constant harvest of prey that blunder into her sticky spirals, fueling her rapid reproductive cycle. Yet armor alone is not her only adaptation. The spiny orb-weaver also modifies her web with unusual structures called web flags or debris lines. Strung outward from the hub, these are not neat silken threads but lines adorned with bits of plant matter, insect carcasses and clumps of silk. To a bird flying through the thickets, these flags serve as warning signs, making the otherwise invisible web more noticeable and preventing accidental collisions. While at first glance it may seem counterproductive, why advertise the trap? The strategy is a pragmatic one. A destroyed web means wasted silk and lost feeding opportunities. Better to alert birds with visible markers, deterring them from flying directly into the fragile structure, than to rebuild each day after unnecessary damage. The construction process is a diorama of efficiency and risk management. At dusk or dawn, the spiny orb-weaver begins anew, dismantling the old web if necessary, and consuming the silk to recycle precious proteins. She then establishes anchor points among the branches, choosing stems that can flex but not snap under tension. Unlike her larger relatives, she cannot afford to span wide gaps. Instead, her web is modest in scale, rarely more than a hand's breadth across. Yet within this small frame she builds with geometric precision, radii converging at her armored hub, spirals of sticky silk carefully laid to intercept the traffic of the undergrowth. Wind presents another constant challenge. Near the ground, air currents swirl unpredictably, funneled between plants in gusts that can tear silk from anchors. To counter this, the spiny orb-weaver selects attachment points that absorb shock. A flexible blade of grass may sway violently in the wind, but when paired with sturdier twigs, the web as a whole can stretch and rebound without tearing. Some individuals even add extra support lines, guy wires that brace the structure against prevailing breezes. Such choices are not random. They reflect the spider's sensitivity to tension and her instinctive ability to distribute forces across the web's architecture. Throughout the day, the web is a stage of constant traffic. Flies approach flowers and are snared mid-flight, their wings buzzing frantically until the spider scuttles out from the hub. Beetles wander onto the spirals, their legs tangled in adhesive strands. Even small moths, distracted by the dense vegetation, stumble into the trap. Each time the spiny orb-weaver rushes in, fangs delivering venom, legs rapidly binding the victim in swathes of silk before dragging it back to the hub. For a spider of such modest size, the prey are substantial meals, fueling egg production and survival in a perilous environment. Her daily routine reflects both vulnerability and resilience. The web, being low and accessible, is prone to damage not only from birds but from larger insects, mammals brushing through vegetation, and the relentless accumulation of dust and debris. Each morning or evening, she evaluates its state, making repairs, reinforcing sagging lines, or dismantling entire sections when efficiency declines. To watch her work is to see architecture as a living process, not a static product. Every decision is an adjustment to wind, prey flow, and predator pressure. The spiny orb-weaver's ecological role extends beyond her own survival. By building in plant corridors, she acts as a regulator of insect traffic, reducing the abundance of small herbivores that might otherwise damage vegetation. Her debris lines, meanwhile, provide microhabitats for detritivores like mites and springtails, which scavenge organic fragments caught in the silk. Even predators are influenced. Birds that learn to recognize the warning flags may alter their flight patterns, shaping the flow of movement through the undergrowth. Thus, this tiny spiny spider, armored and vigilant, exerts influence far greater than her size suggests. Her reproduction further illustrates the balance between risk and defense. Males, as in many spider species, are smaller and more delicate, often approaching cautiously along the edges of a female's web. Here, her spines present an ironic twist. The very defenses that deter birds do nothing to protect the male if the female decides he is prey. Courtship involves a series of vibrational signals, the male plucking lines rhythmically to communicate his intent. If accepted, he mates quickly, often at great risk, and may not survive the encounter. Yet his genetic legacy continues, carried in the armored offspring that soon scatter through the undergrowth. Surprisingly, the Spiny Orb-weaver is not restricted to tropical jungles. Variants exist across continents, from American woodlands to Asian forests, each with local adaptations in spine shape, body color, and web placement. Some species sport red or white shells, others yellow or black, all sharing the same distinctive spiked silhouette. This wide distribution testifies to the success of their strategy. Armor plus adaptation to high-traffic environments yields survival across diverse ecosystems. By afternoon, when the sun warms the edges of the thicket, the Spiny Orb-weaver rests at her hub, body rigid, spines gleaming faintly against the green backdrop. To a passing bird, she looks more like a thorn or a piece of debris than a meal. To an insect, she is invisible until it is too late. Her web, braced with debris flags, sways gently in the wind, absorbing each gust without collapse. Around her, the constant flow of prey continues, and with each capture, she reinforces the ecological truth written in her spines and silken threads, that even the smallest architects, when armed with the right defenses, can claim space in the busiest corridors of life. The lesson of the Spiny Orb-weaver is one of paradoxes. She is fragile yet fortified, conspicuous yet camouflaged, tiny yet impactful. Her web is modest in size but rich in function, not just a snare but a negotiation between survival and destruction. In her daily cycle of construction, defense, and repair, she reveals the ingenuity of evolution's designs, where even armor can hang lightly on a string. In the still heat of midday, when many creatures retreat into shade, a steady rasping sound drifts from the hollow of a fallen branch. It is not the chewing of termites, nor the gnawing of beetle larvae, but the deliberate work of a solitary architect, the female carpenter bee. Her black and yellow body glints as she hovers briefly at the entrance, wings vibrating with a metallic hum. Then she disappears into the darkness, mandibles working like chisels against the dead wood. With patient, unhurried force, she is sculpting space, linear tunnels that will become both nursery and fortress, carved not for consumption, but for continuity. Unlike termites, carpenter bees do not digest cellulose. They're not wood eaters, but wood excavators, artisans rather than consumers. Their strong mandibles scrape and gouge, reducing solid fibers into fine sawdust, which they push out of the gallery entrance in small grainy piles. Each stroke of the jaw is powered by muscular precision, and over hours, the gallery extends deeper into the branch. Viewed in cross-section, the tunnels are astonishingly straight, their walls smooth, almost polished, as though sanded by human hands. This perfection is not an aesthetic luxury, but a necessity. Smooth galleries resist collapse, prevent fungal invasion, and ease the repeated comings and goings of the bee herself. At intervals along the tunnel, the carpenter bee constructs brood cells, chambers sealed with partitions made from chewed wood pulp mixed with saliva. Into each cell she places a loaf of pollen, moistened with nectar, and shaped into a compact mass that serves as both bed and pantry for the larva to come. Upon this provision she lays a single egg, then seals the chamber with a resinous plug. The resin is not random glue. It functions as a biological shield, infused with antimicrobial properties that protect the developing larva from bacterial and fungal attack. Within these sealed vaults, the next generation of carpenter bees quietly grows, sustained by the energy-rich paste of pollen and honey. The sequence of chambers within the gallery reflects a remarkable strategy of generational timing. Eggs deposited at the far end develop first, while those near the entrance mature later. This arrangement ensures that when the young emerge, the deepest siblings leave the tunnel before their younger kin block the way. Evolution has thus organized the brood not only in space but also in time, creating a living conveyor belt of emergence. By late summer, the tunnel that once echoed only with the scraping of mandibles may house a row of sealed chambers, each one pulsing with life. Carpenter bees are often misunderstood as destroyers of wood, but their ecological role is more complex. They target dead, softened timber, not the healthy heartwood of living trees. In doing so, they accelerate decomposition processes, opening cavities that later serve as shelters for beetles, spiders, ants, and other invertebrates. Even small vertebrates, geckos or tiny frogs, may occupy abandoned galleries, using them as daytime refuges. In this way, the carpenter bee's engineering ripples outward, shaping community structure in the microhabitat of fallen wood. Their choice of material reflects exquisite sensitivity to wood condition. Fresh, dense timber is avoided. Instead, they seek weathered branches, softened by sun, rain, or fungal exposure. The mandibles test the grain, and only when fibers yield to pressure does excavation begin. This preference minimizes competition with wood-boring beetles and termites, which often target the same substrates but at different stages of decay. By partitioning their niche in this way, carpenter bees reduce conflict and maximize resource availability. Observing the female at work reveals not just mechanical force but subtle engineering. The tunnel follows the grain of the wood, rarely deviating, as though the bee reads the hidden architecture of the tree itself. Branch diameter sets limits. Too narrow, and there is no space for brood cells. Too broad, and the effort required outweighs the benefit. Within optimal branches, tunnels may extend for more than 30 centimeters, each side chamber carefully measured in proportion to the female's body size. The architecture is both standardized and adaptive. Standardized in its linearity, adaptive in its adjustment to local constraints of wood density and branch geometry. The social behavior of carpenter bees adds another layer to their engineering. Though often described as solitary, many species tolerate or even encourage the presence of multiple females within a single gallery. In some cases, mother and daughters share the same tunnel, each maintaining her own brood cells but cooperating in defense and repair. These extended families exemplify a form of incipient sociality, where cooperation evolves not to the complexity of ants or honeybees, but enough to enhance survival in a risky world. Shared galleries are more resilient, as multiple workers can repair entrances, ward off intruders, and extend tunnels across years. Indeed, carpenter bees are among the few insects that create generationally extended nests, with daughters often reusing and enlarging the galleries of their mothers. Over time, a single branch may contain a labyrinth of interconnected passages, layered histories of effort etched in wood. Predator-prey interactions further highlight the precariousness of this life. Woodpeckers, with their chisel-like beaks, are among the carpenter bee's most dangerous foes. Drawn by the sound of larval movement within sealed cells, they hammer into branches to extract developing bees. To counter this, females often choose branches with protective bark layers or anchor galleries within denser sections of wood. Ants, too, pose a constant threat, raiding brood cells for protein-rich larvae. Here, the resinous plugs prove essential, sealing chambers with barriers too tough for many intruders to breach. In ecosystems where parasitic wasps abound, some carpenter bees add additional debris at entrances, masking the scent of their brood. Every architectural choice, from tunnel depth to sealant thickness, is a negotiation with the predator landscape. Their foraging behavior connects them intimately to flowering plants. Carpenter bees are powerful pollinators, capable of buzzing at frequencies that release pollen from flowers that resist ordinary visitors. This buzz pollination benefits crops such as tomatoes, eggplants, and blueberries. In some regions, carpenter bees are among the most efficient pollinators of wild plants, carrying pollen grains across kilometers of fragmented habitat. Thus, their timber engineering is inseparable from their botanical contributions. The same female that labors in wood by afternoon may visit dozens of flowers in the morning, sustaining not only her own brood, but entire plant communities. Interestingly, carpenter bees do not store honey like their social cousins. Instead, all collected pollen and nectar is invested directly into brood provisions. This strategy reflects their solitary or semi-social nature. Without a colony to feed, long-term storage is unnecessary. What they gather is consumed within weeks, transformed into larvae that will carry their lineage forward. In evolutionary terms, this efficiency minimizes waste, but also makes carpenter bees vulnerable to environmental fluctuations. A season of poor flowering can sharply reduce reproductive success, highlighting the delicate balance between pollination ecology and insect survival. By evening, as the forest cools, the female retreats into her gallery. The entrance is small, barely larger than her body, easy to guard with her armored head. Behind her stretch the straight corridors she has carved, brood cells sealed like tiny vaults, the next generation safe within. Outside, the piles of sawdust mark the day's labor, silent testimony to hours of work. To human eyes, these may seem like minor details of forest decay. But in truth, they represent an intricate form of animal architecture, timber carved not for shelter alone, but for reproduction, protection, and ecological succession. The Carpenter Bees story is a reminder that architecture in nature is not always grand or visible. Sometimes it is hidden in the heart of wood, its corridors lined with pollen loaves and resin plugs, unseen yet essential. Each tunnel is a chapter of survival, each brood cell a vault of future pollinators. In their persistence, carpenter bees demonstrate how even solitary insects shape ecosystems, not only by what they build, but by what they leave behind. Long after the bee has gone, her galleries remain, adopted by new tenants, part of the ever-shifting mosaic of forest life. In the stillness of early summer, when the canopy hums with the movement of bees and butterflies, a different kind of sound rises from the forest edge. It is a dry, rasping scrape, the steady abrasion of mandibles against bark. A hornet worker, her yellow-striped body flashing in the sun, gnaws at the surface of a weathered tree. Tiny fibers come loose under her jaws, reduced to slivers of cellulose. She pauses only briefly, moistening the fragments with saliva, chewing them into a pliable pulp. What was once inert bark is now transformed into a building material, light, strong, and versatile. With this grey paste carried between her jaws, she returns to her nest. She is not simply gathering food, she is foraging for architecture. Hornets are the paper makers of the insect world. With nothing more than plant fiber and saliva, they engineer structures that rival mammalian hives and bird colonies in complexity. From the outside, a mature nest resembles a layered orb or teardrop, its surface sculpted into scalloped sheets of mottled paper. To human eyes, it might recall a crumpled lantern left to weather. But within lies a city, orderly, efficient, and alive with activity. A cross-section of the nest reveals its true genius. Beneath the paper envelope, the hornets have built combs of hexagonal brood cells, stacked in tiers and suspended by narrow stalks. Each comb resembles a fragment of a honeybee hive, yet here the architecture is hidden inside a protective shell of layered paper. The envelope is not mere camouflage. Its multiple sheets provide insulation, buffering the brood against both heat and cold. In cooler climates, workers thicken the walls, adding layers until the nest resembles a fortress. In hotter regions, they leave the paper thinner, relying instead on living air conditioning, worker hornets standing at the entrances, fanning their wings in coordinated rhythm to circulate air. This thermal regulation ensures that the brood, hornet larvae developing within their waxy cradles, remain at a narrow range of tolerable temperatures. Too much heat and they desiccate. Too much cold and growth slows fatally. The city's survival depends on precise climate control. The logistics of life inside the paper city are no less intricate. At dawn, workers depart along invisible routes, guided by pheromone trails laid down by previous foragers. These chemical roads extend across meadows and groves, leading to sources of prey. Unlike bees, hornets are not nectar specialists, they are hunters, harvesting protein. Flies, caterpillars, and even small vertebrates may fall victim to their raids. With powerful mandibles, the hornets dismember their catch, chewing flesh into a pulpy mass. This is not consumed directly by the adult. Instead, the protein pulp is ferried back to the nest, where it is fed to the larvae. The larvae, in turn, secrete a sugary liquid, which the adults lap up as fuel for their tireless foraging. Thus a pipeline of energy flows through the city, meat into the brood, sugar out to the workers. Each generation is bound by this reciprocal economy, survival contingent on exchange. Communication underpins the efficiency of these raids. A successful forager, upon returning, may pass chemical cues that direct her sisters to the same hunting grounds. These pheromone signals are ephemeral, fading quickly, yet they are enough to mobilize dozens of hunters. When prey is abundant, such as a caterpillar outbreak, the colony's activity surges, its workforce focusing with precision on the resource until it is depleted. In this way, hornet colonies exert powerful control over local insect populations, acting as apex invertebrate predators. But no city is invulnerable. The paper nest, though resilient, is fragile in the face of storms, mammalian raids, or accidental damage. Here, the hornet's emergency response unfolds with military speed. Workers immediately gather at the breach, secreting saliva and laying fresh pulp to seal the gap. Others fan their wings to disperse alarm pheromones, rallying reinforcements. If predators such as bears or badgers rip into the nest to consume larvae, hornets swarm in coordinated defense, delivering stings with venom potent enough to deter even large intruders. Their ability to repair structural damage while simultaneously mounting a defense is a hallmark of their resilience as a colony. The efficiency of hornet engineering lies not only in their paper pulp, but in their organizational plasticity. A nest begins with a single queen in spring. Having overwintered in soil or bark crevices, she emerges and constructs the first small comb, laying her initial eggs and feeding the larvae herself. Once the first workers mature, the queen retires from foraging, focusing entirely on egg-laying while her daughters expand the city around her. From this point, growth accelerates. By midsummer, the nest may contain hundreds of individuals, each fulfilling specialized roles. Some collect fibers for construction, others hunt, still others stand guard at the entrance. The city grows in synchrony with its workforce, each layer of paper reflecting both labor and necessity. Thermal ecology shapes the daily rhythm of the colony. In the cool mornings, activity is subdued, with workers clustering close to brood combs to share body heat. As temperatures rise, fanning behavior increases, airflow regulated to prevent overheating. The envelope's layered design traps pockets of air, functioning as insulation. Some species even adjust the thickness of the paper layers seasonally, thickening them as autumn approaches. This seasonal remodeling underscores the dynamic nature of the nest, not a static monument, but a living, breathing structure. Interactions with the surrounding ecosystem highlight both the importance and the peril of hornet architecture. Birds may harvest fibers from abandoned nests, repurposing them for their own constructions. Parasitic insects, tiny wasps and flies, attempt to infiltrate, laying their eggs among hornet brood. In response, guards patrol the combs, swiftly ejecting invaders. Even fungi and microbes pose threats, exploiting the humid interiors. Here, the hornet's sanitation routines become evident. Workers remove waste, discard dead larvae, and patch damp sections of paper to minimize decay. A neglected nest quickly succumbs to microbial invasion. A well-maintained one endures through the season. By late summer, the city reaches its peak, humming with life and layered with paper. Yet the colony's glory is temporary. As autumn advances, resources dwindle, and the queen's egg-laying slows. The workers, their lifespans short, begin to die off. Only new queens, fattened on abundant food, survive to overwinter. The once bustling paper city, stripped of its citizens, falls silent. Winter rains soften its walls, and by spring it collapses, its materials scattered back into soil. But the cycle is not truly ended, for each new queen carries within her the blueprint of the city, encoded in instinct, ready to chew bark into pulp once more. The paper city of the hornets is a reminder that architecture in nature is never an end in itself. It is a process, sustained by energy, maintained by cooperation, and vulnerable to time. Every layer of bark fiber tells a story of foraging flights. Every comb records the balance of heat, humidity, and labor. In the hum of wings fanning at the entrance, in the urgency of repairs after storm damage, we see not only survival but civilization, scaled to the needs of insects, yet resonant with the same principles that govern human cities. As the sun dips behind the tree line, hornets continue their flights, returning with fresh pulp or shredded prey. The nest breathes with them, paper walls expanding ever outward, a city spun from wood and saliva, built to last only a season yet functioning with the precision of ages. In its rise and fall is written a profound truth. Architecture need not endure for centuries to matter. Even a fragile lantern of bark and spit, suspended for a single summer, can shape an ecosystem, embody cooperation, and reveal the genius of evolution's engineers. On the forest floor, where roots twist like buried cables and the soil shifts with unseen life, there rises a structure that seems almost geological in its patience. At first glance, it is only a mound of earth, a small dome crusted with grains of sand and bits of leaves. Yet this mound is no passive pile. It is the outer shell of a living city, built not by the hands of architects, but by the collective jaws of red ants. Beneath its modest surface stretches a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, each one carved to channel air, regulate moisture, and safeguard grain-like stores of food. Above ground, streams of ants flow in ceaseless lines, their traffic as coordinated as the rush of vehicles on a city highway. The mound itself is a marvel of functional design. Each granule of soil has been carried in place by a worker, placed with attention to both stability and porosity. The outer layers are coarse, allowing water to drain away quickly during rains, while finer particles are used deeper inside to form smooth passageways. Ventilation shafts punctuate the structure, angled to exploit differences in wind and temperature. Warm air rises through the upper vents, drawing in cooler drafts from shaded entrances at the base. This passive air exchange keeps the colony's interior within tolerable limits, even in the sweltering heat of midsummer. The ants, without ever drawing a blueprint, harness physics as effectively as any engineer. Moisture control is equally critical. Too much dampness encourages mold and pathogens that could ravage the brood. Too little, and larvae desiccate. Ant workers continuously monitor conditions, sealing entrances during storms, excavating fresh shafts when airflow falters, and shifting soil to maintain balance. Some species even bring water droplets into the nest, distributing them in chambers to moderate humidity. The colony is not static, but constantly remodeled, its architecture reflecting an ongoing negotiation with the elements. Within these subterranean spaces lies another layer of complexity, the storage and sorting of resources. Red ants collect seeds, insect fragments, and resinous materials, each placed in specific chambers according to size, moisture content, or purpose. This grain sorting is not random. Dry seeds are stored where humidity is lowest, reducing the chance of germination or decay. Protein-rich insect parts are carried elsewhere, often consumed quickly before they rot. Some species go further, cultivating symbiotic fungi on stored plant matter, turning their nest into a subterranean farm. Through such practices, the ants transform foraged chaos into organized economies, each chamber an inventory of survival. Yet the architectural ingenuity of red ants extends far beyond the soil. When their foraging routes meet obstacles, they deploy a different kind of structure, not one built of soil or fiber, but of themselves. Confronted with a gap between twigs or a void over water, workers link their bodies together, legs and mandibles interlocked, to form living bridges and ladders. From above, one can watch the chain begin with a single ant stretching into space, joined by another, then another, until a span is formed. Once established, traffic flows across the living structure, other ants marching over the backs of their connected kin. These bridges are dynamic, flexing under load, adjusting as members enter or leave. They represent not only cooperation, but a form of distributed problem-solving, where no individual plans the whole, yet the collective produces an engineered solution. The same principle emerges dramatically in times of flood. Red ants, especially species adapted to monsoon climates, do not abandon their colonies when rivers rise. Instead, they link their bodies into rafts, each ant clinging to another until a buoyant mass forms. The queen and brood are placed in the center, shielded by layers of workers, while the outer ants endure the water's touch. By trapping air among their interlocked bodies and hydrophobic hairs, the raft floats, sometimes for weeks, drifting until it grounds on higher terrain. Though many individuals perish, the colony survives as a whole, transported by its own living vessel. It is an act of sacrifice and resilience, written into the very fabric of ant society. Above ground, the colony's organization is visible in the roads of foragers. Pheromone trails mark the paths, invisible to us but pungent to ants, guiding workers between nest and food. These chemical highways are not simple lines but intricate networks. Where traffic is heavy, ants instinctively form two lanes, outbound foragers keeping to one side, inbound carriers to the other. This division reduces congestion and increases efficiency, mirroring the logic of human road systems. If a path becomes crowded, some ants divert, exploring alternative routes until new lanes emerge. What appears chaotic from afar is, on closer inspection, a flexible algorithm of movement, an emergent order that optimizes flow without central control. The foraging algorithms extend to resource allocation. Scouts wander ahead, and when one locates food, she lays down a pheromone trail on her return. The strength of the trail reflects the quality and quantity of the find. Other ants follow, reinforcing the path if the food source proves rich, or abandoning it if the yield declines. In this way, the colony distributes its workforce dynamically, concentrating where gain is greatest. Computer scientists have studied these behaviors to develop optimization algorithms, drawing inspiration from ants' efficiency to solve problems in logistics, communication, and even robotics. What the ants evolved to do for survival becomes a model for human technology. Predators and competitors test these systems constantly. Spiders lie in ambush near trails, picking off unwary workers. Rival colonies may challenge territorial boundaries, leading to battles where thousands of ants clash in miniature wars. Here again, organization is evident. Ants form battle lines, pressing forward in waves, their chemical communication coordinating retreat and reinforcement. Victories secure new foraging grounds, defeats force relocation or surrender. The colony's architecture, its mound, its tunnels, its roads, is not merely defensive but territorial, asserting presence in a contested landscape. Thermoregulation, too, plays a role in the ant's survival. Some red ant species adjust the shape of their mounds seasonally, flattening them in winter to retain heat, raising them in summer to vent excess warmth. The soil, grain by grain, becomes a tool of climate adaptation, shaped continuously to buffer the fragile life within. Workers cluster around brood in cooler times, their collective metabolism raising local temperatures by several degrees. In heat, they spread the brood into multiple chambers, dissipating warmth through space and airflow. The mound breathes with them, its form a living compromise between biology and environment. By dusk, when the air cools and shadows lengthen, the red ant colony remains active. Foragers stream back with grains of food, their lines converging on the nest entrance like rivers feeding a basin. Inside, workers sort and store, repair tunnels, and tend larvae. Above, scouts still search, leaving faint chemical markers that will guide dawn's expeditions. The colony never truly rests. It is both organism and superorganism, each ant a cell, the nest its skeleton, the pheromone trails its nervous system. The lesson of the red ants lies in the seamless merging of structure and behavior. Their mounds are not inert shelters but breathing lungs. Their bridges and rafts are not separate constructions but extensions of their bodies. Their roads are not static tracks but fluid networks shaped by need. Everything is adaptive, dynamic and functional. In their ceaseless labor, they reveal an architecture that is not drawn but lived, not designed but evolved. To watch them is to witness the principle that survival is not the triumph of individuals, but of collectives, that intelligence can emerge not from planning, but from interaction, and that cities need not be built of stone or steel to embody complexity. On the forest floor, underfoot and often unnoticed, the red ants continue their endless work, reshaping soil, spanning gaps, weathering floods, and flowing indisciplined lines, a civilization written in earth and bodies, durable not by permanence but by adaptability. On the surface of a green stem, where sap surges unseen beneath a thin skin of bark, small insects cluster in tight formation. To the untrained eye, they may look like nothing more than thorns or leaf buds, irregular growths along the plant's veins. Yet a closer look reveals living forms, each crowned with bizarre protrusions, arches, spines, and helmet-like extensions that blur the line between animal and plant. These are tree hoppers, insects whose ingenuity lies not in webs or tunnels, but in relationships. Their architecture is social, not structural, an engineering of alliances rather than materials. A colony gathers along the vascular highways of their host plant, inserting their needle-like mouthparts into phloem vessels that ferry sugary sap from leaf to root. By tapping this resource directly, tree hoppers live in a world of abundance, their bodies swelling with excess fluid. Yet abundance is never free. The constant tapping exposes them to predators, lacewing larvae, spiders, and especially ants that might easily consume them. The tree hopper's answer to this vulnerability is to transform waste into currency. From their bodies they excrete honeydew, droplets of sugar-rich liquid produced as byproduct of sap feeding. What would otherwise be discarded becomes a resource exchanged in a biological economy. Enter the ants. Drawn to the promise of sugar, they patrol along the stems where tree hoppers feed. A tree hopper, when tapped by an ant, releases a glistening drop of honeydew, eagerly lapped up by the patrolling partner. In return, the ant offers something more valuable than sugar: security. Ant mandibles and stings deter predators, their vigilant patrols forming a living guardrail around the feeding colony. The pact is simple, yet profound: food in exchange for defense. It is agriculture in miniature, a farm of insects tended not by humans, but by ants, each partner exploiting the other's needs to mutual benefit. The arrangement is not passive. Tree hoppers actively manage their farms. Some species secrete wax filaments that coat their eggs, shielding them from desiccation and infection. Others deposit egg masses beneath leaf tissue, covered with frothy secretions that deter parasites. These egg covers, along with the waxy coatings on nymphs, form a kind of protective infrastructure, ensuring the continuity of the colony. In some species, mothers remain to guard their eggs, a rare act of parental care among insects, further highlighting the value placed on their social architecture. The physical structures they create are modest, but the invisible architecture of cooperation, patrol, and signaling is far richer. Ant patrol routes unfold like the traffic of a city. Workers march along stems, tracing pheromone lines that link colony to farm. At intervals, they tap tree hoppers with antennae, soliciting honeydew. Each exchange reinforces the bond, a small payment in sugar for continued vigilance. When predators approach, a lacewing larva creeping up the stem, for example, the ants respond with immediate aggression, biting and stinging until the intruder retreats or is killed. Tree hoppers, incapable of such defense on their own, benefit immensely from this militia service. Colonies attended by ants suffer far fewer losses than those left unguarded. Alarm and coordination add further depth to the system. Tree hoppers do not merely sit as passive clients, they communicate with one another through vibrations sent along the plant stem. By pressing their abdomens against the substrate and oscillating internal muscles, they produce low-frequency pulses, tiny pings that travel faster through the plant tissue than sound could through air. These signals serve multiple purposes: warning of predators, coordinating movement, or summoning attention. When danger looms, a chorus of vibrational alarms may ripple through the colony, priming ants to intensify their patrols. In effect, the tree hoppers extend their reach by speaking not only to each other, but also indirectly to their guardians, leveraging vibrations to mobilize security. These substrate-borne conversations are so precise that researchers, using sensitive equipment, have mapped entire repertoires of calls. Some are short pulses, others long modulations, each pattern encoding a distinct message. One vibration may mean predator detected, another move to new feeding site. The ants themselves cannot hear these signals directly, but they respond to the behavioral changes they trigger among the tree hoppers. In this way, communication is triangulated. Tree hoppers talk to one another, and the resulting shifts in behavior influence the ants' patrol intensity. It is an interspecies communication loop, fragile yet effective. The economic balance of this pact can shift depending on context. When sap is abundant and honeydew flows freely, ants are plentiful and colonies thrive under their protection. But in times of scarcity, ants may become exploitative, harassing tree hoppers aggressively for drops of honeydew or even preying on eggs when sugar yields fall. Tree hoppers, in turn, adjust their behavior, sometimes producing vibrational signals that mimic alarm to summon more ants when predators appear. The relationship, while mutualistic, is also tense, an uneasy alliance where both sides constantly negotiate terms through behavior and chemistry. Predators, meanwhile, are not entirely excluded. Some specialist parasites have learned to bypass ant defenses. Tiny parasitic wasps, for instance, lay eggs within tree hopper nymphs despite the presence of guards, using stealth and speed to evade detection. Spiders may spin webs above ant patrol routes, snaring the flying adults before ants can intervene. These breaches remind us that no system is perfect, and that even the most carefully tended farms exist within broader ecological webs of predation and parasitism. The role of tree hoppers extends beyond their own colonies. By diverting phloem into honeydew, they change the energy flow of plants. Ants drawn to farms may in turn alter the local balance of predators, reducing numbers of herbivores that would otherwise feed unchecked. Some plants indirectly benefit from this triangle, gaining protection from ants that guard the tree hoppers, but also deter caterpillars or beetles from chewing their leaves. Others suffer, as heavy feeding by tree hoppers drains resources and stunts growth. Thus, the architecture of these farms influences not only insect lives, but the fortunes of entire plants. From an evolutionary perspective, the diversity of tree hopper forms, the strange helmets, the mimicry of thorns and leaflets, adds another layer to their story. Many species have evolved extravagant shapes that make them indistinguishable from plant structures, hiding their farms in plain sight. Combined with ant protection, this camouflage increases survival. It is a dual defense, one passive, blending with the plant, the other active, enforced by ant armies. Together, these adaptations allow tree hoppers to persist in habitats where unprotected sap feeders would be swiftly eliminated. By evening, as light fades and the air cools, the colony remains fixed along its chosen stem. Ants continue their patrols, collecting drops of honeydew that glisten like beads of sugar water in the twilight. The tree hoppers remain still, their bodies aligned like beads on a string, their vibrational conversations humming silently through the stem beneath them. To passers-by, they are invisible, mistaken for buds or thorns. But within this apparent stillness is a complex economy, a partnership negotiated through chemistry, vibration, and risk. The story of tree hoppers is not one of grand architecture built from silk or wood. It is a story of invisible architecture, constructed from relationships and signals, defended by allies, and concealed by mimicry. Their farms may not rise like mounds or hang like webs, but they shape ecosystems as surely as any fortress or hive. By turning waste into wealth, by recruiting armies through sugar, tree hoppers reveal that survival can be engineered not only with structures but with partnerships. That in the forest, sometimes the strongest walls are made of allies, not stone. Beneath the quiet surface of a forest floor, where roots branch through soil like hidden rivers and stones sit heavy with the weight of centuries, an unseen civilization stirs. There are no visible walls or towers here, no mounds or paper domes, but below ground stretches a network of tunnels more ancient and enduring than most insect structures. These are the burrows of cicada nymphs, an underground city built not of stone or silk, but of patience. Each nymph inhabits a chamber along the root of a tree, mouthparts sunk deep into the living xylem, siphoning a steady stream of diluted sap. It is a slow existence, quiet and enduring, yet astonishing in scale. Millions of individuals sustained beneath a single woodland, their combined architecture shaping the very soil around them. The cicada's mouth is its primary tool of survival underground. Unlike predators armed with fangs or mandibles, the nymph is equipped with a pump, a piercing, straw-like beak fitted with valves and muscles that draw xylem fluid upward. Xylem is a lean diet, mostly water with only trace nutrients, but it is constant, flowing year after year through the tree's vascular system. To compensate for the low energy content, Cicadas consume vast quantities, filtering out what little nutrition exists and expelling the rest as waste. This abundance of diluted sap allows the nymphs to remain anchored to roots for extraordinary spans of time. 2 years, 5 years, even 13 or 17 years in some species, waiting until conditions above ground align for emergence. Their tunnels are the infrastructure that sustains this patient feeding. Narrow shafts and side chambers carefully carved to provide both access to roots and safe retreats from predators in the soil. Over the years, the burrows deepen and expand, a labyrinth of interconnected chambers hugging the base of trees. The soil is not uniform, and nymphs adapt their architecture to its texture. In sandy ground, they reinforce walls with compacted pellets, pressing them smooth to prevent collapse. In clay-rich soil, tunnels are angled to minimize flooding, water redirected into lateral pockets. The placement of each chamber reflects not only the location of roots, but also the need for airflow, with shafts positioned to ventilate the humid depths. Though each nymph works alone, together they shape subterranean neighborhoods, parallel burrows running in such density that the ground above is honeycombed with unseen passageways. As the years pass, the underground city bides its time. Then, with subtle cues, soil temperature rising in spring, day length shifting, or internal chronometers encoded in biology, the nymphs prepare to ascend. They begin to carve exit shafts that lead toward the surface, narrow corridors slanting upward through packed soil. The engineering here is remarkable. To prevent collapse, the walls are reinforced with saliva-cemented soil, forming tubes that resist rain and erosion. In wetter sites, where waterlogging could suffocate the tunnels, the nymphs fashion chimneys, small turrets of mud that rise above the soil like miniature volcanoes. These chimneys keep airways dry, allowing oxygen to flow while keeping floodwaters at bay. Seen across a meadow, they appear like a scatter of strange earthen pipes, silent markers of the multitudes waiting just below. Then comes emergence, one of the most dramatic spectacles in insect life. On a warm evening, when soil reaches the right threshold, often 18 degrees Celsius or higher, the nymphs climb their shafts en masse. The synchronization is uncanny. In periodical cicadas of North America, millions upon millions rise within days, a living tide of black bodies crawling onto trunks and stems. The numbers are so immense that the soil itself seems to crackle with movement. Each nymph, after years in darkness, now anchors itself to bark, the seam of its exoskeleton splitting as the pale, soft adult pushes free. Wings unfold, fluid fills the veins, and the body hardens into the familiar form. A stout insect with membranous wings, capable of flight and, soon, of song. The synchrony of this event is not coincidence, but survival strategy. Cicadas are defenseless as individuals. Birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects all seize upon them as food. A single nymph or a small group would be wiped out within minutes. But when millions emerge together, the arithmetic of predation changes. Predators gorge until they can eat no more, yet countless cicadas remain, untouched. This survival through excess, known as predator satiation, is one of evolution's boldest gambles. By overwhelming enemies with sheer abundance, the cicadas ensure that enough adults survive to reproduce. The emergence transforms ecosystems. Predators enter a temporary golden age, feasting on cicadas with abandon. Birds feed chicks with an endless supply of protein, mammals fatten on the glut, and even fish take advantage when cicadas tumble into streams. For weeks, the forest resounds with feeding frenzies. Yet the payoff for cicadas lies not in the fate of individuals, but in the continuity of the brood. After mating, females insert eggs into slender slits cut into twigs, ensuring the next generation will drop to the soil when hatched, burrow down, and resume the cycle of subterranean patience. Even after death, cicadas shape the landscape. The sheer volume of bodies that fall to the forest floor enriches the soil with nitrogen and other nutrients. Microbes, fungi, and scavengers thrive on the windfall, accelerating decomposition and feeding the next wave of plant growth. In this way, the underground city and its synchronized exodus echo across the food web, influencing organisms far beyond the cicadas themselves. The mud chimneys, though temporary, embody the cicada's delicate balance with environment. They are more than air shafts. They are adaptations to hydrology, born of necessity in regions where rain can suffocate entire broods. Each chimney represents foresight encoded in instinct, a miniature monument to survival. When the emergence passes, the chimneys crumble, blending into soil once more. But for a brief season, they stand as the only visible evidence of the vast population below, like smokestacks hinting at an unseen metropolis. The cicada's strategy is not without risks. A warming climate may shift soil temperatures, disrupting emergence cycles. Human alteration of landscapes, paving, ploughing and clearing forests, destroys root systems and the subterranean chambers clinging to them. In places where broods once blanketed woodlands, silence now reigns. Yet where conditions remain intact, cicadas continue their ancient rhythm, their calendars set not by years as we count them, but by generations woven into soil and sap. By nightfall during an emergence, the forest is alive with the drone of males calling to females, their timbals vibrating with astonishing volume. The underground years culminate in this chorus, a declaration of presence that can reach over 100 decibels. It is as though the earth itself has found voice, proclaiming the persistence of a lineage that has waited nearly 2 decades to sing. The story of cicadas is thus one of contrasts. Years of silence beneath ground, followed by weeks of thunderous sound above it. Centuries of evolutionary fine-tuning expressed in fragile bodies that live only briefly as adults. The solitude of individual burrows balanced by the mass synchrony of emergence. Their architecture is hidden, their cities unseen, but their impact is immense. By tunneling through soil, by building chimneys against floods, by emerging together in incomprehensible numbers, cicadas demonstrate that engineering in nature is not always about visible structures. Sometimes it is about timing, patience, and the ability to turn vulnerability into strength. When dawn follows the night of emergence, the forest floor is littered with husks, chimneys, and discarded shells, evidence of the transformation. Above, countless cicadas cling to branches, their songs rising in waves. The underground city has emptied, its architects gone to the surface. In their place remain the echoes of tunnels and the faint outlines of chimneys, the remnants of a civilization that lived in darkness, engineered survival, and surfaced in a singular, deafening triumph.